The garden was my sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, where memories of my late husband faded into the rhythm of pruning and planting. It was my haven, my escape, until he arrived. Leo was young, full of life, and gifted with a quiet warmth that seeped into my days. I told myself it was nothing more than friendship, just a shared love for the soil and the blooms. But as summer crept along, I felt something stir within me, a feeling I hadn't acknowledged in years. Our conversations became more than just garden talk, and soon, the garden held more than flowers. It held secrets, desires, and choices I wasn't ready to face. And just when I thought I'd found a delicate balance, my son returned, dredging up old memories, hidden truths, and forcing me to confront the choices I'd buried deep. Now I wonder if my heart's journey was worth the risk. The sun was high when Leo arrived for his first day at my garden, a place I had nurtured for decades. I had almost canceled our arrangement, hesitant about letting someone else into the space that had become my sanctuary. But when he stepped through the gate, his calm expression and gentle smile somehow put me at ease. "Good morning, Mrs. Morgan," he said, extending a hand. His voice was warm, steady, the kind that felt genuine. "Call me Rose," I replied, shaking his hand. "Thank you for coming." Leo set to work with ease, his movements deliberate and skillful as he assessed the garden's layout. He had a natural eye for design, a quiet confidence that surprised me, especially given his age. Overgrown bushes and stubborn weeds didn't deter him. Instead, he approached each challenge with patience and respect for the plants, as if he truly understood the spirit of the garden. Throughout the day, I couldn't help but be drawn to his attentiveness, the way he asked about each flower bed, each tree, each patch of earth that I had tended to for so many years. I found myself telling him stories of my husband, of how we'd planted the first rose bush together, of the seasons we had shared in the garden. He listened, never interrupting, his gaze soft, his focus unwavering. As the hours passed, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years, a sense of companionship that seemed as natural as the blooming flowers around us. And though I reminded myself that he was just here for work, just another helping hand, I couldn't ignore the gentle thrill that lingered long after he left that evening. Over the weeks, Leo became more than just a landscaper. Each morning, he arrived with fresh ideas for the garden, sketches he had drawn up, plans for breathing new life into the space. And with each project, each shared idea, our conversations grew deeper, filled with moments of laughter and mutual understanding that surprised us both. One day, as we pruned the hedges along the garden's edge, he paused, looking at me thoughtfully. "I can tell this garden means a lot to you, Rose. It's like each part of it holds a piece of you." His words struck a chord, a reminder of the life I had built here, the memories I had cultivated with my late husband. "It does," I replied softly. "This garden is more than just plants. It's a history, a life." Leo nodded, his gaze filled with an empathy that felt almost too intimate. And in that moment, I felt a connection that went beyond our shared love for gardening. There was a quiet understanding between us, an unspoken bond that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. As we continued working together, I found myself looking forward to our time in the garden, to the quiet companionship that seemed to blossom in the spaces between words. And though I told myself it was just friendship, a simple connection, I couldn't ignore the gentle thrill that stirred within me each time he looked my way. My granddaughter Claire was the first to notice the change. She visited often, bringing her bright energy and youthful optimism that always brought a smile to my face. But lately, she had been casting curious glances my way, her eyes lingering on the garden, on Leo, with a look that was both inquisitive and wary. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping iced tea, she turned to me, her gaze thoughtful. "Grandma, you seem different lately. Happier. Is everything okay?" I smiled, brushing off her question. "Oh, I'm just enjoying the summer, and Leo has been a great help with the garden." She nodded, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. "He's here a lot, isn't he?" "Yes, well, there's a lot of work to be done," I replied, keeping my tone light. But her words left a lingering tension, a quiet worry that perhaps my connection with Leo wasn't as subtle as I'd thought. As the days passed, I felt Claire's watchful eyes on us, her subtle questions, her quiet suspicions. And though I tried to keep my distance, to maintain the boundaries I had set, I found it harder to ignore the growing affection I felt for Leo, the joy that his presence brought to my life. But alongside that joy came a quiet fear, a reminder that our connection, our hidden moments, were fragile, and that the love I had found was both beautiful and dangerous. One evening, after a long day of planting, Leo and I sat on the garden bench, the scent of freshly turned earth and blooming flowers filling the air. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the garden, and for a moment we sat in silence, lost in the beauty of the moment. "I have to thank you, Rose," Leo said softly, his gaze steady. "Working here, it's given me a sense of peace I didn't know I needed." His words touched me, a reminder of the quiet companionship we had shared, the bond that had grown in the gentle rhythm of gardening together. I looked at him, feeling a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something I hadn't felt in years. "Leo," I began, my voice barely a whisper, "I'm the one who should be grateful. You've brought life back into this garden and into my life." He reached out, his hand covering mine, his touch warm and reassuring. For a moment we sat like that, our hands intertwined, the unspoken words between us heavy with meaning. And then slowly, he leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was both tender and filled with longing. The world seemed to fade, leaving only the warmth of his touch, the quiet beauty of the garden, and the depth of the connection we had found. When we finally pulled back, I felt a mixture of joy and guilt, a reminder of the line we had crossed, the boundary we had broken. But as I looked into his eyes, I knew that this was a connection I couldn't deny. A love that had blossomed in the quiet corners of my heart, a gift that had brought me both happiness and uncertainty. From that evening on, Leo and I shared a series of quiet, hidden moments, stolen glances, whispered words, and secret embraces beneath the shade of the garden's trees. Each encounter was filled with a mixture of passion and restraint, a delicate balance of love and caution that left me both exhilarated and anxious. We met in secluded corners of the garden, sharing conversations that went beyond plants and flowers, diving into dreams and fears that we hadn't dared to voice before. I felt alive, rejuvenated by his presence, and yet a part of me knew that our love was fragile, that it existed in a space that was as delicate as the petals of the roses we tended. But as much as I cherished our secret affair, I felt the weight of our love, the quiet dread that came with each hidden kiss, each whispered confession. I knew that if anyone found out, especially Claire, the life I had built could crumble, the relationships I had cherished could be damaged beyond repair. And yet, despite the risks, I chose to live in the moment, to savor the joy I had found, even as I felt the shadows of doubt creeping in. A reminder that our love was both a gift and a gamble. Just as I thought I had found a balance, a way to keep our love hidden, my son, Oliver, arrived unexpectedly, bringing with him a storm of emotions and memories I had long buried. His return was both a joy and a challenge, a reminder of the past we had shared and the secrets we had kept. Oliver had always been distant, his relationship with me strained by years of misunderstandings and unspoken regrets. He looked around the garden with a critical eye, his gaze lingering on Leo with a hint of suspicion that made my heart race. "Mom, who's this?" he asked, his tone casual but laced with an undertone of curiosity. "This is Leo," I replied, forcing a smile. "He's been helping with the garden." Oliver nodded, his expression unreadable. But as he looked between us, I sensed that he knew more than he let on, that he could see the connection we shared, the bond that had grown in the quiet of the garden. And as I watched him, I realized that my secret love was in jeopardy, that the life I had built, the family I had cherished, was at risk. And though I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, I knew that reality had a way of intruding on even the most beautiful dreams. Since his return, Oliver had been spending more time in the garden, observing both me and Leo with a quiet curiosity that made me uneasy. He often joined me in the afternoons, asking about my memories of his father, a topic we rarely discussed. I sensed that he was looking for something more, perhaps hoping to understand the family dynamics that had always felt elusive to him. One afternoon, while I was pruning the roses, Oliver approached me, his tone tentative. "Mom, I can't help but feel like there's something you're not telling me. Something about Dad." I paused, feeling a familiar ache at the mention of my late husband. Our marriage had been a mix of love and struggle, a bond we'd held together through both joy and hardship. But there were things about my husband that I'd never shared with Oliver, pieces of the past I'd chosen to keep hidden for his sake. "Your father was a good man," I replied carefully. "He loved us both, but he had his own battles, his own secrets." Oliver's gaze held a quiet intensity, a determination that left me unsettled. "I want to know the truth, Mom. I feel like I never really knew him, and I think it's time you told me everything." As I looked into his eyes, I realized that the secrets I had kept were no longer mine to hold, that the past I had buried was resurfacing, demanding to be faced. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the memories that would follow, knowing that this was a journey we would have to take together, a path that would bring both healing and pain. One afternoon, as I shared a private moment with Leo in a secluded part of the garden, I felt a sense of peace, a joy that had come from finding love once more. He held my hand, his touch gentle, yet filled with a quiet strength that left me feeling both comforted and exhilarated. But as we stood together, lost in each other's presence, a shadow appeared from the corner of my eye. I turned, heart racing, only to see Oliver watching us from a distance, his expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. I quickly stepped back, my pulse racing as I tried to appear nonchalant. "Oliver, I didn't expect you out here," I said, my voice unsteady. He looked between Leo and me, his gaze filled with a quiet suspicion that left me feeling exposed. "Mom, is there something going on between you and Leo?" His voice was laced with disbelief, his tone a stark reminder of the boundaries I had crossed. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "Leo and I are just close friends. He's been helping with the garden, and we've gotten to know each other well." Oliver didn't respond immediately, his gaze lingering on me with a mixture of doubt and disappointment. I felt the weight of our hidden love pressing down on me, a reminder that the life I had built, the relationships I cherished, were hanging in the balance. As he turned and walked away, I realized that our love was on the verge of being discovered, that the connection we had found could crumble under the scrutiny of family and judgment. The next morning, Oliver confronted me, his expression a mixture of frustration and confusion. I sensed that he had pieced together more than I wanted him to, that the boundaries I had tried to keep were no longer enough to hide the truth. "Mom, I don't know what's going on between you and Leo, but it's not right," he began, his voice laced with both accusation and hurt. "He's young enough to be your son. Have you thought about what this means for our family?" I felt the weight of his words, each one a reminder of the risks I had taken, the boundaries I had crossed. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of shame and defiance, a realization that the choices I had made had brought both love and loss. "Oliver, I know this isn't easy for you to understand," I replied softly. "But Leo, he's been a source of happiness, a light in my life that I haven't felt in years. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to feel alive again." He looked away, his expression pained, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what about Dad? What about the life you built together? Doesn't this disrespect everything he stood for?" His accusation cut deep, a painful reminder of the love I had shared with his father, the loyalty that had bound us even after his passing. But as I looked into Oliver's eyes, I knew that my love for Leo was as real as the love I had once known, a connection that had brought me joy, even in the face of judgment. "I understand your feelings, Oliver," I said, my voice filled with both sorrow and resolve. "But my love for your father and my love for Leo are two different things. I don't expect you to understand, but I hope you can accept that this is part of my journey." He looked at me, his gaze filled with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. And as he turned to leave, I felt the weight of our choices pressing down on me, a reminder that love, even in its beauty, could come at a cost. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension, a distance that grew between me and Leo, a reminder of the difficult choices we both faced. I felt the love we had shared, the joy he had brought to my life, but I also knew that my loyalty to my family, my role as a mother and grandmother, was a bond I couldn't ignore. One evening, Leo and I met in the garden, the same place where our love had blossomed, now filled with a sense of finality, a quiet understanding that our journey was nearing its end. "Helen," he began, his voice filled with a mixture of pain and acceptance. I know that what we have, it's not easy. And I don't want you to feel torn. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. I looked at him, feeling the warmth of his presence, the depth of the connection we had shared. But as I took his hand, I realized that the love I felt for him, though genuine, was a gift that could only live in the quiet of the garden, a memory that would remain even as we parted ways. Leo, I will always be grateful for what we shared, I replied, my voice trembling. But I think it's time for us to say goodbye. I have to put my family first. I have to protect the bonds I have with them. He nodded, his gaze filled with understanding, though his expression held a sadness that left me feeling both comforted and heartbroken. We shared a final embrace, a tender goodbye that held all the love, all the memories, all the joy we had found in each other's presence. And as he left, I knew that I had made the right choice, that my loyalty to my family, my love for my son, was a bond that could not be broken, even as my heart ached with the loss of the love I had found. The days after Leo's departure were filled with a quiet sadness, a sense of emptiness that lingered in the garden, in the spaces we had once shared. I spent my days tending to the plants, each bloom a reminder of the love we had found, the happiness that had come and gone like the seasons. One afternoon, as I watered the roses, Oliver joined me, his expression softer, his presence a comforting reminder of the family I still had, the bonds that had carried me through both joy and sorrow. Mom, he began, his voice gentle, I know things have been complicated, and I may not understand everything, but I just want you to know that I still love you. That's never going to change. His words brought a tear to my eye, a mixture of gratitude and relief that filled me with a sense of peace. Thank you, Oliver. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to feel something, to remember what it was like to be loved. He nodded, his gaze filled with empathy. I understand, Mom, and I don't want you to feel guilty for that. I want you to be happy, whatever that looks like. We shared a quiet moment, a mutual understanding that our journey toward healing had begun, that we were both moving toward a place of forgiveness, a place where love, in all its forms, was something to be cherished. In the days after Leo's departure, Oliver and I spent more time together, sharing quiet moments in the garden that had once been my sanctuary and had now become a place of renewal. Our conversations were filled with the honesty and vulnerability I had once feared, but now embraced as a path toward healing. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Oliver looked at me with a mixture of compassion and curiosity. Mom, I've been thinking about everything, about Dad and the life you've had since he passed. I think I'm beginning to understand what it must have been like for you. I didn't realize how lonely you'd been. His words touched something deep within me, a reminder of the solitude I had lived with for so long, the quiet ache I had carried in my heart. It hasn't been easy, I admitted softly, but the garden helped, and for a time, Leo helped too. Oliver nodded, his gaze thoughtful as he looked out over the garden. I may never fully understand, but I want you to know that I respect your choices, Mom. I want you to know that you're not alone. I reached over, taking his hand in mine, feeling a surge of gratitude for the bond we had rebuilt, the love that had carried us through both joy and sorrow. Thank you, Oliver. I'm grateful for you, more than you know, and I want you to know that my love for you has always been constant. He smiled, a quiet warmth in his gaze, and in that moment, I knew that the journey we had taken, the challenges we had faced, had brought us closer, had taught us both the value of acceptance and compassion. And as we sat together, I felt a sense of peace, a knowledge that the choices I had made, the love I had found, had led me to a place of healing. A place where forgiveness and understanding bloomed alongside the memories of the past. With Leo gone, and my relationship with Oliver strengthened, I found myself spending more time in quiet reflection, journaling my thoughts, processing the emotions that had filled my life over the past months. Each word I wrote felt like a piece of my journey, a testament to the love and loss that had shaped me. In my journal, I penned a final letter to Leo, a farewell that held all the gratitude, all the love, all the memories we had shared. Leo, I began, the words flowing freely, thank you for bringing joy back into my life, for showing me that love is timeless, that it exists beyond age and convention. Though our time together was brief, it was filled with a richness that I will carry with me always. I wish you happiness, love, and success in all you do. You will always hold a special place in my heart. As I closed the journal, I felt a sense of closure, a quiet acceptance that settled over me like the gentle rustle of leaves in the garden. I knew that while our love had been fleeting, it had left a lasting impact, a reminder of life's beauty and the strength that comes from embracing both joy and sorrow. And though the memory of Leo lingered, a gentle reminder of the love we had found, I knew that I was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with both courage and gratitude. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself embracing a new chapter, a life filled with small moments of joy and fulfillment. I reconnected with old friends, attended local events, and even joined a gardening club, finding a sense of purpose and companionship that left me feeling both grounded and free. Each morning, I tended to the garden, my hands working the soil, each plant a reminder of the love and memories that had filled my life. The roses bloomed with renewed vigor, their colors vibrant, their scents sweet, a symbol of the journey I had taken, the growth I had embraced. I found joy in the simple pleasures of life, in the laughter of friends, in the warmth of the sun, in the gentle rhythm of each day. I no longer felt the weight of loneliness, the ache of solitude that had once filled my heart. Instead, I felt a sense of fullness, a knowledge that I had loved deeply, lived fully, and embraced the beauty of both love and loss. One afternoon, as I worked in the garden, a neighbor stopped by, admiring the flowers, commenting on the vibrancy of the blooms. "You have a gift, Rose," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "This garden is magical." Her words brought a smile to my face, a quiet satisfaction that filled me with a sense of pride. I realized that the garden, much like my life, was a reflection of the choices I had made, the love I had given, the strength I had found. And in that moment, I knew that I was ready for whatever lay ahead, that the future was filled with possibilities waiting to be embraced. As the seasons changed, I found myself attending a community garden gathering, surrounded by people who shared my love for the soil, the beauty of nature, the joy of watching life bloom. I felt a sense of belonging, a thrill that reminded me of the journey I had taken, the love I had found, the lessons I had learned. I met new acquaintances, shared laughter and stories, each connection a reminder of the richness that life had to offer. I felt a quiet confidence, a sense of excitement for the future, a knowledge that I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, with an open heart and an unburdened spirit. Looking back, I realized that while love had come and gone, it had left a mark on my heart, a legacy of memories that I would carry forward. The garden had been my sanctuary, a place where I had loved, lost, and found myself. And as I stood at the threshold of a new beginning, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet joy that filled me with gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. In the gentle light of the setting sun, I felt a thrill of possibility, a knowledge that I was ready to live fully, to love deeply, to embrace each day with both courage and grace. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that I was ready to create new memories, to build a life filled with love, laughter, and the beauty of each moment. With a heart unburdened by the past and a spirit filled with hope, I walked forward, embracing the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Months later, as I looked out over the garden, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a knowledge that the choices I had made, the love I had known, had brought me to this moment. The roses bloomed, the garden filled with life, each plant a reminder of the strength, the resilience, the beauty that had carried me through both joy and sorrow. I had loved deeply, lived fully, and found a sense of self that had brought me peace. And as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, I knew that I was ready for whatever life had to offer, that the future was a gift waiting to be embraced. With a heart filled with gratitude and a soul unburdened by regret, I looked toward the days ahead, ready to live, to love, and to embrace each moment with an open heart. If you'd told me 6 months ago that I'd be here, alone, unraveling the strands of a life I thought was solid, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, everything in my world was predictable. From the unspoken silences in my marriage to the quiet tread of my stepson's footsteps echoing in the halls. But things change, don't they? Sometimes in a single moment. It began innocently enough, as these things often do. I wanted to feel free again, to escape the weight of the routine that pressed down on me like a lead blanket. Running seemed like the answer. A few miles in the cool night air, a space where I could be alone with my thoughts. And for a while, it was just that, simple, harmless. Then Rowan started joining me. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was young, fit, and probably bored out of his mind staying in a house with his father and me. His presence was a surprise, but not unwelcome. He pushed me harder, teased me about my pace, and before long, those runs were something I looked forward to. But somewhere along the way, the dynamic shifted. A lingering glance here, a touch on the arm there. By the time I realized how far we'd gone, it was too late to turn back. I can't tell you exactly when it happened. Maybe it was that night in the rain, when we were both drenched and laughing like teenagers, and he looked at me in a way I hadn't been looked at in years. Or maybe it was in the silence afterward, when the world felt impossibly small, and the only thing that mattered was the heat of his breath on my skin. I know what you're thinking. And you're right, this isn't a story with easy answers. It's messy, painful, and complicated in ways I'm still untangling. But if you're here for the truth, then I'll give it to you. Because the truth is, that night didn't just change my life. It shattered it. When Rowan moved back in, it was supposed to be temporary. Just until I figure things out, he'd said, standing in the doorway with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. I wasn't thrilled about it, but Gerald insisted. He's my son, Lydia, he'd said, his tone brooking no argument. We can't just turn him away. So Rowan moved into the guest room, and for the most part, he kept to himself. He spent his days working part-time at a gym downtown, and his evenings tinkering with a beat-up motorcycle in the garage. He was polite, even charming at times, but there was a guardedness to him, a sense of distance that I couldn't quite breach. My relationship with Gerald, meanwhile, was as stale as ever. We'd been married for nearly 15 years, and somewhere along the way, we'd stopped trying. His work as a corporate lawyer consumed him, leaving little room for anything else. We spoke in pleasantries, and moved through the house like two ships passing in the night. That's how the running started. I needed something, anything, to fill the void. It was late spring when I began, the evenings still cool enough to make the effort feel refreshing. I'd lace up my sneakers after dinner and slip out the door, my footsteps echoing softly against the pavement as I traced a loop through the quiet streets. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Gerald rarely noticed when I left, and Rowan was busy with his own life. Or so I thought. Mind if I join you? His voice startled me one night as I stretched on the porch. I turned to see him standing there, dressed in running gear, a faint smirk on his lips. I didn't know you ran, I said, more out of surprise than anything else. I don't, he admitted, but it looks like you could use the company. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep this small ritual for myself, but another part, the part that had grown used to being invisible, couldn't bring itself to refuse. Suit yourself, I said, shrugging. It became our thing after that. Every evening, Rowan and I would set out together, his easy stride matching mine as we fell into an unspoken rhythm. At first, the conversation was light, small talk about his job, my work, the neighbor's unruly dog. But as the weeks passed, our exchanges grew deeper. I'm glad I came back here, he said one night as we jogged past the park. Even if it's only temporary. Being away from the military, it's harder than I thought it would be. I glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. What do you mean? Rowan hesitated before replying. It's like, I don't know who I am anymore. Out there, everything made sense. There were rules, structure. Here, it's just chaos. I think a lot of people feel that way, I said carefully. It's hard to adjust when everything changes. Yeah, he murmured, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. The change between us was subtle at first. During one of our runs, Rowan reached out to steady me as I stumbled over a crack in the pavement. His hand lingered on my arm for a moment longer than necessary, and I felt a spark of something I couldn't quite name. "Careful," he said, his tone light, but his eyes serious. I laughed it off. But the moment stayed with me, replaying itself in my mind long after I'd gone to bed. The pivotal moment came a few nights later. We'd just finished our usual loop and were sitting on a bench at the edge of the park, catching our breath. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the trees. "I think this is my favorite part," Rowan said, gesturing to the quiet around us. "The stillness. It's like the whole world disappears." I nodded, my gaze drifting to the shadows that danced along the ground. "It's peaceful," I agreed. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Rowan turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Lydia," he said softly. I looked at him, my breath catching in my throat. "What is it?" Before I could process what was happening, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a tentative, almost hesitant kiss. We pulled apart almost immediately, both of us startled by what we'd done. "I'm sorry," Rowan said quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay," I replied, though the words felt hollow. But as I looked at him, I realized something that shook me to my core. I didn't regret it. After the kiss, there was no running the next evening, or the evening after that. I told myself I needed space to think, to figure out what had happened and what it meant. But the truth was, I couldn't stop replaying that moment on the park bench, the warmth of his lips on mine, the way his gaze lingered as if waiting for me to pull away. For days, the house felt unbearably small. Gerald was his usual distracted self, too preoccupied with work to notice my restlessness. Rowan, meanwhile, stayed in his room or disappeared to the gym, giving me the distance I claimed I wanted but secretly hated. It wasn't until the third night that I found myself on the porch again, lacing up my sneakers as if on autopilot. I told myself I was going out alone, that I needed the solitude to clear my head. But as I stepped out into the cool evening air, Rowan appeared at the bottom of the steps, his own running gear already on. "Mind if I join?" he asked, his tone tentative. I hesitated, the memory of his kiss hanging between us like an unspoken question. But then I nodded, unable to find the words to refuse. Our run that night was quieter than usual, the rhythm of our footsteps the only sound breaking the stillness. Neither of us spoke as we rounded the familiar loop, but the tension was palpable, a charged current humming just beneath the surface. When we reached the park, the first drops of rain began to fall, light at first but quickly building into a steady downpour. "Come on," Rowan said, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward a small wooden gazebo near the edge of the path. We ducked under the shelter, both of us laughing breathlessly as the rain drummed against the roof. I shook the water from my hair, aware of how close he was standing, the heat of his body cutting through the chill of the evening. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. I nodded, but the words caught in my throat as I looked up at him. His hair was damp, droplets clinging to his lashes, and his eyes held that same intensity I'd seen on the bench. "Rowan," I began, but he silenced me with a kiss, deeper and more insistent this time. For a moment I let myself melt into him, the world outside the gazebo fading into a blur of rain and shadows. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt my resolve slipping away, replaced by a need I hadn't felt in years. When we finally pulled apart, I pressed a hand to his chest, my breath ragged. "This isn't right," I whispered, though my body betrayed the words. "I know," he said, his voice low and steady, "but I don't care." The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of stolen moments and whispered confessions. Rowan and I avoided Gerald as much as possible, finding excuses to leave the house at different times or retreat to the guest room when he wasn't home. At first it felt like a reckless game, each meeting charged with the thrill of secrecy. But as the weeks passed, the reality of what we were doing began to sink in. "We can't keep this up," I said one afternoon as we sat in the gazebo, our usual meeting spot. "Someone's going to find out." "Then let them," Rowan said, his hand brushing mine. "I don't care about anyone else, I care about you." His words sent a rush of warmth through me, but they also filled me with dread. I wanted to believe him, to let myself fall into the fantasy of what we'd created. But the practical side of me, the part that had spent years holding our fractured family together, knew it couldn't last. The guilt came in waves, unpredictable and all-consuming. I'd sit across from Gerald at dinner, listening to him talk about his latest case, and feel the weight of my betrayal pressing down on me like a stone. "What's been going on with you?" he asked one night, his tone unusually sharp. "You've been distracted lately." "I've just been busy with work," I said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Gerald frowned but didn't press further, his phone buzzing with an incoming email that quickly drew his attention away. Rowan, meanwhile, seemed unaffected by the guilt that plagued me. He was bolder than ever, finding excuses to touch me when we were alone and sneaking into my room late at night when Gerald was working late at the office. "You worry too much," he said one evening, as we lay tangled in the sheets, his fingers tracing lazy patterns along my arm. "We're not hurting anyone." But we were. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks in our carefully constructed facade began to show. It happened one evening as Rowan and I sat in the gazebo, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the park. We'd lost track of time, caught up in a quiet conversation about everything and nothing, when I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. "Lydia?" I froze, my blood turning to ice as Gerald's voice cut through the stillness. Rowan and I sprang apart just as Gerald rounded the corner, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion as he took in the scene before him. "What are you two doing out here?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "We were just talking," I said quickly, my voice trembling. "I wanted to get some fresh air, and Rowan happened to be here." Gerald's eyes lingered on me for a moment too long before he nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well, don't stay out too late," he said, turning and walking away without another word. As soon as he was out of earshot, I turned to Rowan, my heart pounding. That was too close. "He doesn't know anything," Rowan said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. But I wasn't so sure. The close call with Gerald shook me more than I cared to admit. For the first time since our affair began, I found myself questioning whether it was worth the risk. "We should stop," I said one night as Rowan and I sat on the edge of my bed. "Before we ruin everything." "Do you really believe that?" he asked, his voice soft. I hesitated, the weight of his gaze making it impossible to lie. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm scared of what's going to happen if we don't." Rowan reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't want to lose this," he said. "I don't want to lose you." His words brought tears to my eyes, but they also deepened the ache in my chest. Because as much as I wanted to believe in the world we'd built for ourselves, I knew it wasn't sustainable. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that our time was running out. After the near discovery at the park, Gerald's behavior began to change. At first, it was subtle. A lingering glance when I entered the room, a question asked in a tone that felt sharper than necessary. But as the days passed, his suspicion became more overt. "You've been spending a lot of time out lately," he remarked one evening as we sat at the dinner table. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed something else, curiosity, or perhaps accusation. "I've been running," I replied evenly, spearing a piece of roasted asparagus with my fork. "You know that?" "With Rowan?" he pressed, his gaze steady. I froze for the briefest of moments before forcing a laugh. "He's been joining me sometimes, yes. He's trying to stay in shape." Gerald nodded, his expression unreadable. "Interesting." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered, hanging over the table like a storm cloud. Unbeknownst to me, Gerald's suspicion had driven him to take drastic action. A few days later, while I was out running errands, a man arrived at the house. He was dressed in a crisp gray suit, his demeanor professional but intimidating. "I'm here to see Mr. Hartwell," he said when Rowan answered the door. Rowan frowned, stepping aside reluctantly as Gerald appeared in the foyer. "Victor Calloway," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. "Private investigator." Gerald shook his hand, his jaw tightening. "Come into my office," he said. Rowan lingered in the hallway, his unease growing as he watched the two men disappear into Gerald's study. He didn't know what they were discussing, but the presence of a private investigator could only mean one thing. Gerald was digging. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in Gerald's behavior. He began coming home earlier than usual, his briefcase noticeably lighter, as if he'd left work unfinished. He spent more time observing Rowan and me, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Is everything okay?" I asked one evening as we sat in the living room. "Fine," Gerald replied curtly, his gaze flickering toward Rowan, who was sitting across the room scrolling through his phone. But it wasn't fine. I could feel the walls closing in, the sense of security I'd clung to crumbling with every passing moment. The storm broke one evening when Gerald came home earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I heard the door slam with a force that made the windows rattle. "Lydia," he called, his voice cold and hard. I turned to see him standing in the doorway, a manila folder clenched tightly in his hand. His expression was a mixture of anger and triumph, his jaw set like granite. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I think you know," he said, his tone razor sharp. He opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs, throwing them onto the counter. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Rowan and me at the gazebo, our bodies close, his hand brushing against mine. "I hired a private investigator," Gerald said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's been following you for weeks." My heart dropped into my stomach as I stared at the evidence of my betrayal. The truth laid bare in stark black and white. "Gerald, don't," he interrupted, slamming his hand onto the counter. "Don't you dare try to deny it." The sound of raised voices brought Rowan into the kitchen, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he saw the photographs. "Dad," he began, but Gerald turned on him, his face contorted with rage. "How could you?" Gerald demanded. "How could you do this to me, to this family?" "It's not what you think," Rowan said, his voice shaking. Gerald laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and cutting. "Not what I think? These pictures say otherwise, don't they?" I stepped between them, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "Gerald, please. Don't," he snapped, his voice laced with venom. "You've betrayed me, both of you. And now you're going to stand there and ask me to listen?" "Dad, it's not like that," Rowan said, his tone pleading. "Then tell me what it's like," Gerald shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "Explain to me how my wife and my son thought this was acceptable." Neither of us had an answer. The confrontation ended with Gerald storming out of the house, his footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor. Rowan and I were left standing in the kitchen, the silence between us deafening. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rowan shook his head, his expression grim. "I don't know." That night, Gerald didn't come home. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as the weight of what we'd done pressed down on me like a physical burden. In the days that followed, the house became a battlefield. Gerald refused to speak to me, his cold silence cutting deeper than any words could have. Rowan, meanwhile, began spending more time away from the house, retreating to the gym or taking long drives to escape the tension. "We can't go on like this," I said one evening, as Rowan and I sat in the gazebo. "It's tearing us apart." "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice laced with frustration. "I can't fix this, Lydia. None of us can." His words hung in the air, a painful truth I couldn't deny. The situation reached its breaking point when Gerald returned home one evening with a stack of legal documents. "I've filed for divorce," he said, his tone matter of fact. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." The finality of his words hit me like a blow, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Gerald, please," I began, but he cut me off with a dismissive wave. "I don't want to hear it," he said. "You made your choice, Lydia. Now you'll live with the consequences." Rowan, who had been listening from the hallway, stepped forward, his expression dark. "You don't have to treat her like this," he said. Gerald turned to him, his eyes cold. "And you don't have to be here. In fact, I'd prefer it if you weren't." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the man I had betrayed. The days that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. Gerald moved out of the house, leaving behind only the echo of his anger and the papers that marked the end of our marriage. Rowan, too, disappeared, his presence reduced to the occasional text or voicemail. I spent my days going through the motions, my once bright world now painted in shades of gray. The gazebo, once a place of comfort, now felt like a monument to everything I had lost. But even in the midst of the chaos, a small part of me clung to the memory of what Rowan and I had shared. It wasn't perfect, far from it, But it was real. And in a world that had become so hollow, that small spark of truth was enough to keep me going. The days after Gerald's departure were marked by a hollow stillness. The house felt too large, the rooms echoing with a silence that seemed to mock me. Each night, I would lie awake in the empty bed, haunted by memories of Gerald's anger, Rowan's absence, and my own betrayal. I tried to reach Rowan, leaving voicemails that went unanswered and texts that remained unread. Each passing day without a response deepened the ache in my chest. The weight of his absence more crushing than I wanted to admit. For a while, I thought he might never come back. It was nearly 2 weeks later when I heard the sound of a motorcycle pulling into the driveway. My heart leapt as I rushed to the window, and there he was, Rowan, stepping off the bike with an air of quiet exhaustion. I opened the door before he could knock, the sight of him filling me with a complicated mix of relief and anger. "You're back," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm sorry," he replied, his tone soft. "I needed some time." "To do what?" I demanded. "Disappear without a word?" Rowan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean to worry you, I just needed to figure things out." "And did you?" I asked, crossing my arms. His eyes met mine, and for a moment he looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "Not really," he admitted. Over the next hour, Rowan told me everything. About his time in the military, the choices he'd made, and the debts he'd incurred while trying to support a friend who had fallen on hard times. "It got out of control," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought I could fix it, but I ended up making things worse." I listened in silence, the weight of his words settling over me like a thick fog. "And now?" I asked. "Now they found me," he said. "A man named Damien Crowley. He's not the kind of person you can just ignore." The name sent a chill down my spine. "What does he want?" "Money," Rowan replied. "More than I can pay." It wasn't long before Damien Crowley made his presence known. He showed up at the house one afternoon, a sleek black car pulling into the driveway with the kind of deliberate menace that sent my heart racing. Rowan met him outside, his posture tense as he approached the car. I watched from the window, my stomach twisting into knots as Crowley stepped out, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're late, Rowan," Crowley said, his tone casual but laced with an undercurrent of threat. "I told you I needed more time," Rowan replied, his voice steady but tight. "Time isn't something I give freely," Crowley said, his smile fading. "You owe me. And if you can't pay, I'll take what I'm owed in other ways." His gaze flicked toward the house, and I felt a surge of panic. "I'll get you the money," Rowan said quickly, stepping between Crowley and the door. "Just leave her out of this." Crowley's smile returned, cold and calculating. "You've got 1 week," he said before climbing back into his car. After Crowley left, Rowan came inside, his expression grim. "This has to stop," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't keep running from this." "What choice do I have?" he asked, his frustration evident. "I don't have the money, Lydia, and Crowley isn't the kind of man you can reason with." "Then we'll figure something out," I said firmly. "But you can't face him alone." Rowan hesitated before nodding. "There's one thing I can try," he said. "But it's risky." "What is it?" He told me about a small stash of cash he'd hidden in a storage unit before leaving the military. A last resort he hadn't wanted to touch. It wasn't enough to cover the full debt, but it might be enough to buy time. The next morning, we drove to the storage unit, a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of town. Rowan opened the unit with a key he'd kept on a chain around his neck, revealing a few scattered boxes and a locked safe. As he worked to open the safe, I stood guard, my nerves on edge. The air was thick with the scent of dust and oil, the silence broken only by the soft click of the lock as Rowan turned the dial. Finally, the safe opened, and Rowan pulled out a bundle of cash, his expression a mix of relief and tension. "This should buy us some time," he said, tucking the money into a bag. But as we turned to leave, the sound of a car engine roaring to life behind us made my blood run cold. Crowley stepped out of the car, flanked by 2 men who looked just as imposing. "Well, well," Crowley said, his smile razor-sharp. "What do we have here?" Rowan stepped in front of me, his body tense. "You weren't supposed to be here." "And yet here I am," Crowley said, gesturing to the bag in Rowan's hand. "You planning to pay me with that?" Rowan hesitated before nodding. It's not the full amount, but it's a start. Crawley's smile faded. A start isn't good enough. The tension in the air was suffocating as Crawley took a step closer, his gaze fixed on Rowan. "You've got one last chance," he said. "Either pay me what you owe, or this gets ugly." Before Crawley could make good on his threat, Rowan lunged forward, shoving him back and creating just enough of a distraction for us to make a run for it. "Go!" Rowan shouted, pulling me toward the car. We scrambled inside, the tires screeching as Rowan floored the gas pedal. Crawley's men gave chase, but Rowan's military training kicked in, guiding us through a maze of side streets until we finally lost them. When we reached the safety of the house, I collapsed onto the couch, my entire body trembling. "This isn't over," Rowan said, his voice grim. "Crawley won't stop until he gets what he wants." As the night wore on, we discussed our options, each one more desperate than the last. In the end, we decided there was only one way to end this. Confront Crawley head-on and offer him the money with the promise of more to come. "It's a gamble," Rowan admitted, "but it's the only chance we have." I nodded, my fear tempered by a determination I hadn't known I possessed. "We'll face him together," I said. Rowan looked at me, his expression softening. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Maybe not," I replied, managing a faint smile. "But you've got me anyway." Rowan and I spent the next day preparing for what we both knew would be a dangerous encounter. The cash he'd retrieved from the storage unit sat in a duffel bag on the kitchen table, a meager offering compared to the full amount he owed Crawley. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice trembling as I watched Rowan pace the room. "No," he admitted, "but we don't have a choice." He stopped and turned to me, his expression grim. "You don't have to come, Lydia. This isn't your fight." I shook my head. "Yes, it is. We're in this together." His gaze softened, and for a moment, the tension between us eased. But the weight of what lay ahead was impossible to ignore. We arranged to meet Crawley at a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town, a location he had chosen, no doubt to maintain the upper hand. The building was a relic of another era, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. As we pulled up, the headlights of Crawley's car illuminated the lot, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Two of his men stood by the entrance, their expressions cold and unreadable. "Stay behind me," Rowan said as we stepped out of the car, the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Crawley emerged from the building a moment later, his confident stride and razor-sharp smile sending a chill down my spine. "Right on time," he said, his gaze flicking between us. "I like that." Rowan didn't respond, his jaw tight as he handed over the bag. Crawley unzipped it, inspecting the contents with a raised eyebrow. "This isn't everything," he said, his tone flat. "It's all I have," Rowan replied, his voice steady. "But I can get you the rest. I just need more time." Crawley's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "You're out of time, Rowan, and I don't do charity." Crawley motioned to one of his men, who stepped forward and grabbed Rowan by the collar. "Wait," I shouted, stepping forward despite Rowan's warning. "There's no need for this. We're trying to make things right." Crawley's gaze shifted to me, his expression unreadable. "And who are you exactly?" "She's not involved," Rowan said quickly, his voice rising. "This is between us." Crawley ignored him, his attention fixed on me. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said. "But guts won't pay the bills." "Take the money," I said, my voice shaking. "It's a start, and we'll get you the rest. Just give us a chance." For a moment, Crawley seemed to consider my words, but then he laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed through the empty lot. "I don't deal in chances," he said. The situation spiraled out of control in an instant. Rowan lunged at the man holding him, freeing himself with a well-placed punch. Crawley's other henchman drew a knife, his movements swift and precise. "Lydia, run!" Rowan shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. But I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the ground as the scene unfolded around me, a blur of fists, shouts, and the glint of steel in the dim light. Rowan fought with a desperation I had never seen before, his military training evident in every calculated move, but the odds were against him, and Crawley's men were relentless. When one of them finally overpowered Rowan, slamming him to the ground, I felt a surge of panic unlike anything I'd ever experienced. "Stop," I screamed, stepping forward. "Please, stop!" Crawley held up a hand, signaling his men to pause. He walked over to where Rowan lay on the ground, his expression one of mild amusement. "You've got heart, I'll give you that," he said, his tone almost mocking. "But heart doesn't pay the bills either." He drew a gun from his coat, pointing it at Rowan with a calmness that turned my blood to ice. I didn't think. I couldn't. The next thing I knew, I was reaching for the crowbar we'd brought as a precaution, my hands trembling as I lifted it. "Leave him alone," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Crowley turned to me, his expression darkening. "Put that down before you hurt yourself." "Don't come any closer," I warned, tightening my grip. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then Crowley took a step toward me, his smile returning. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Swing that thing?" Before I could respond, Rowan lunged at Crowley from the ground, knocking the gun from his hand. The weapon skidded across the pavement, landing near my feet. "Lydia, grab it," Rowan shouted. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the gun, my hands trembling as I pointed it at Crowley. "Back off," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Crowley raised his hands, his expression shifting from amusement to irritation. "You've got guts," he said again, his tone colder this time. The standoff ended when the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Rowan had called the police earlier, setting a timer to alert them if we didn't check in. Crowley's men scattered, and he glared at us before slipping into the shadows, disappearing into the night. When the officers arrived, Rowan explained the situation, careful to omit the more incriminating details. They took our statements and promised to investigate further, though it was clear Crowley wouldn't be easily caught. As we drove home, the adrenaline began to wear off, leaving me drained and shaky. Rowan reached over, his hand finding mine. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For saving my life," he replied. The events of the night left us both shaken, but they also made one thing painfully clear. Rowan couldn't stay. "This isn't over," he said as we sat on the porch, the first hints of dawn coloring the sky. "Crowley will come back, and I can't put you through that again." "You don't have to leave," I said, my voice breaking. "Yes, I do," he replied. "It's the only way to keep you safe." I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but I knew he was right. We stood in the driveway, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. When Rowan pulled me into his arms, I clung to him, unwilling to let go, even as I felt him slipping away. "Take care of yourself," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You too," I whispered, and then he was gone. The roar of his motorcycle fading into the distance as the sun rose on an uncertain future. The house felt emptier than ever after Rowan left. For the first few days, I found myself listening for the sound of his motorcycle pulling into the driveway, half expecting to see him standing at the door with that sheepish grin that always seemed to soften my heart. But he didn't come back. I went through the motions of daily life, trying to ignore the hollow ache that seemed to settle in my chest. Gerald had already moved out, leaving behind only a few boxes of old files and the divorce papers that sat unsigned on the dining table. I couldn't bring myself to look at them, let alone sign them. Not because I thought we could fix things, too much had been broken for that, but because doing so felt like admitting that everything we'd built together had truly crumbled to dust. Eventually, I forced myself to face the mess I'd created. I packed away the reminders of Gerald, the tie rack he never used, the stack of legal pads he'd always left scattered on the desk, and boxed up the memories of Rowan too. The photos we'd taken as a family, the pair of running shoes he'd left by the door, the half-finished project he'd abandoned in the garage. It wasn't easy. Each item felt like a piece of my heart being peeled away, leaving me raw and exposed. But it was necessary. I couldn't move forward if I kept holding on to the past. About a month after Rowan left, my son Aiden stopped by unexpectedly. I hadn't seen him much since Gerald moved out. He'd been busy with his own life, and I hadn't wanted to burden him with mine. "You look better," he said as we sat in the kitchen, a mug of coffee warming my hands. "Do I?" I asked, surprised. Aiden nodded. "Yeah, like you're finally getting some clarity." I wasn't sure how to respond. The truth was, clarity still felt like a distant goal, something I was fumbling toward in the dark. "How's Dad?" I asked, changing the subject. Aiden shrugged. "He's Gerald. Busy with work, keeping everything bottled up. Trot, you know how he is." I nodded, the weight of my choices pressing down on me again. I hope he's okay, I said softly. He'll be fine, Aiden said. He always is. The letter arrived a few weeks later, the handwriting on the envelope instantly recognizable. My hands trembled as I opened it, the familiar curve of Rowan's words pulling me back into memories I had tried so hard to suppress. Lydia, I've thought about writing this letter 1,000 times, but none of the words ever seemed right. I don't think they ever will. How do you apologize for something like this? How do you thank someone for everything they've given you when you know you didn't deserve it? You saved me, in more ways than one, and for that, I'll always be grateful. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you found some peace. You deserve that, and so much more. As for me, I'm trying. It's not easy, but I'm working on becoming the kind of person you could be proud of. Maybe one day I'll get there. Take care of yourself, Lydia. You're stronger than you know. Rowan. I read the letter over and over, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. There was no mention of where he was or what he was doing, no promises of a future where we might meet again. But there was something in his tone, a quiet determination, that gave me hope. Spring came slowly that year, the days growing longer and the air warmer as the world outside seemed to awaken from its slumber. I started running again, not to escape, but to reconnect. With myself, with the strength I'd forgotten I had. The gazebo in the park became a regular stop on my route. At first, I avoided it, the memories of Rowan and our stolen moments there too painful to face. But as time passed, I found comfort in the stillness of that place, a reminder of both what I'd lost and what I'd learned. I also threw myself into work, taking on more clients than I had in years. Redesigning homes, transforming spaces. It was a distraction, yes, but it was also a way to create something tangible, something that felt like progress. One afternoon, as I was leaving a client's house, I saw Gerald standing by his car. He looked different, tired, maybe, or just older, but his presence still sent a pang of guilt through me. Lydia, he said, his tone neutral. Gerald, I replied, my voice carefully measured. For a moment, we stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. Finally he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted to apologize, he said, for how things ended. I wasn't exactly graceful about it. I blinked, caught off guard. You had every right to be angry, I said. Maybe, he admitted, but I should have handled it better. I was hurt, and I let that cloud everything else. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I'm glad you're doing okay, he added. You look good. Thank you, I said softly. I hope you're doing okay too. He gave a faint smile, then nodded. Take care of yourself, Lydia. You too, I replied. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I found myself reflecting on the past few months. It wasn't just the affair with Rowan or the fallout with Gerald, it was everything. The choices I'd made, the risks I'd taken, the pain I'd caused. I didn't regret it, not entirely. The love I'd found with Rowan, however fleeting, had awakened something in me. A sense of vitality, a reminder that life was still full of possibilities, even in its messiest moments. But I also knew it wasn't something to cling to. Rowan was a chapter in my life, not the whole story. And as much as I missed him, I understood that letting him go was the only way for both of us to move forward.